What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. Welcome back, Nightmare Success listeners. This is where you guys come to hear what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. I've been lucky to always have, and I want to give a shout out to Travis Ritchie, who connected me up with my guest, Kyle Chiaponne. This is a great story. It's about you've got a 10-year sentence. You've got that ended up in a nasty fight, involved some guns, but this is a story about tenacity, about faith, about entrepreneurship, about redemption. I can't wait to get into this because there's so many good nuggets of wisdom that Kyle gives. I listened to one of his podcasts with Travis, Convicted Mindset, which is a great podcast too with Travis Ritchie. And Travis Ritchie was a guest on this show a few back. If you guys are playing the board game at home, I can't remember what podcast he was, but go check it out when you get a chance. Hey, before we get into all that, I want to recognize, and Kyle, I told Kyle before we got on, he's going to have to close his ears while I read this sponsorship because he has Redemption Motors, which is a great dealership down in Florida. So check that out. So here we go. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking the lots looking for a car? Then you spend about 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like going to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take away all this pain and hassle getting a car. Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price, deliver that car to you wherever you are. They also offer you warranties and financing, full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get you started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. All right, folks, here we go. Kyle, welcome in, man. How are you?
Good. But I got to say, man, there's a better way, the redemption way.
There it is, man.
Nah.
And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that story because how you got into redemption auto and just kept stepping and making it happen. That in itself is an inspiring story because a lot of people, when they get into thinking, hey, I'm down on my luck, but I still got an idea. I still think I can do it. But, man, they say the licensing's hard. All this stuff's hard. You walked through all of that, and you just kept, a step layered up, a step layer up, and then there you are, your redemption auto. And I want to get into your backstory because –
Yes, sir.
Let's go back to – because you were telling me earlier, you grew up as a kid that, you didn't have the kid of the alcoholic parents and they're, abusive and all that. You had kind of a good, normal, mom, dad childhood, right?
Yeah, yes, sir. Growing up, man, I'm the youngest boy of 3. Along the way, we did end up even fostering kids. So I got a little brother that was adopted. And, man, just good parents, man, good wholehearted parents. Both of my parents worked their way through college. My mom's dad was an accountant, so he had his own company being an accountant. And, they weren't well off financially, my parents, but they were good enough, right? They were decent. They were middle class. And then my parents pretty much earned everything they had, man. Again, worked their way through college. They met in college. They both ended up finishing, ended up opening their own companies. My dad was a landscaper. My mom sold real estate. They ended up getting out of that and ended up actually becoming school teachers.
Wow.
Which had to be hard for my parents because I was just terrible when it came to school.
So your siblings, were they? You were the youngest, and I foster care Because I remember, being at Leavenworth, there's a lot of guys that went through foster care. What was that whole experience like with your siblings and having somebody come in that was became basically part of the family, foster? How was that?
Yeah, I mean, it was good, man, to be honest. Like, how it transpired is my oldest brother was dating a girl who had a little brother. Her parents lost custody. Her mother lost custody. And it was, man, my parents were great, man. They gave us very much opportunity to think for ourselves, to become our own independent selves. They, broached the subject with us. It's not just like, this is what we're going to do. And this kid, my little brother, he had been in and out of our lives for the last 2 years before the mother actually lost custody. The older daughter, or his sister, which was my brother's girlfriend, was like 17 at the time.
Yeah.
So she was about to be 18. So it's like, my parents actually sat us down and gave us the opportunity to discuss it as a family and said, hey, this is what's happening with the family. We want you guys to be aware, but we don't want to do anything without you guys being in agreement.
That's cool.
And again, we already knew the kid. He was like 11 at the time, and I was like 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And me and both of my brothers, we were in agreement, and we moved forward with the process.
Wow, that's cool. So, growing up as a kid, you said you kind of had a normal child, but you said you were a little bit of a trouble in school. What was your school life like?
Man, you would have never thought it if you looked at me when I was younger, but I was very self-conscious. I didn't believe in myself. I thought I was dumb. I didn't think I was smart. I was labeled ADD, ADHD in elementary school.
Yeah.
I had SLD classes even in elementary school. So, that.
Do you think that made you feel that way, Kyle? Is that where you think that came from? Is that they labeled you and you felt like, hey, I'm different from everybody else?
I don't know if it necessarily came from that, but I'm sure it didn't help. Yeah. Right. And I kind of projected that. So like, instead of allowing people to see that I was insecure, I put out a false bravado into the world as a super alpha male. But inside my mind, I didn't even believe it myself. And that's where a lot of my troubles came from. And that's where a lot of them stemmed from. And I did have a lot of difficulty as a youth controlling my emotions. They actually attempted to label me as emotionally handicapped at one stage, just because I showed out so much in school that the teachers couldn't handle me.
Yeah.
And that was where I think my mom kind of drew the line. She's like, okay, SLD is one thing, but emotionally handicapped is another. And I'm not going to allow you to put my kid, because they had a specific class for emotionally handicapped. And, just from conversing with me on this podcast, you could tell, like, I'm not that there's anything against that, but I'm not in a way of like on the extreme side of the spectrum. Right. I was just a kid that did have lack of self-control when it.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, no, I get that. So,
and on top of that, I was high strung, right?
Yeah.
I probably was ADD, ADHD, but also that's part of my superpower.
I was going to say that. I think that's the thing that makes your story very interesting, because I think you use that to step into things when a lot of people probably would have been scared to, but you took the risk and just, there's a lot to be said about tenacity. And,
yes,
when you keep going and everybody else drops off, you're the last man standing. A lot of times that's a really good thing, because you've gone through all of it.
And, I say it a lot, man. And like, my incarceration is my superpower and it's my kryptonite.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for like the ADD, ADHD, the things that I experienced in school, the different attributes to my character, the tenacity, the intensity, the hard-headedness. These are my superpowers, but they're also my kryptonite, right? Because if you apply them in the wrong way, with the wrong mindset, with the wrong attitude, it can lead you in the wrong directions very quickly, like what you said. Whereas most people might stutter step, they might think too long, they might not make the decisions, which we all know as entrepreneurs, making quick decisions is a necessity, right? Whereas a lot of people, they get caught up and the lack of the ability to actually make those decisions. Right. There's a term that they use I'm trying to think of, but
Well, you don't have to be perfect when you're creating a business.
Exactly.
You have to take action when you take a business, and then you learn and evolve as you go. I want to go back to, because you were explaining to me, Kyle, that you got into the streets, you got into drugs, you got into the world of, the danger zone. But walk me through how that happened, because you're kind of a middle-class kid. You got working parents. You didn't grow up on the streets. So how did you get into that?
Yeah. So, what we were just discussing is, as a youth, the one thing that I was good at was sports, right? So my parents put me into every sport there was, and I excelled in all of them. But by the time I was in like third, fourth grade, I had started getting in so much trouble that my dad just didn't sign me up one year for soccer. And I was like, well, what happened? He's like, well, I didn't think you wanted to play anymore, And that was kind of the beginning of the end. Not to say that it's my dad's fault, but I started hanging around with a circle of individuals, kids that were around my age, a couple years older, that were all kind of just getting into a rebellious state, whether we were riding around bikes and like shooting BB guns at cars, or throwing oranges, or like stealing candy bars or stupid stuff out of the corner stores. Like, all of us were just kind of up to a little bit of rebellion, which as a young man and as a youth, you're going to get into a little bit of that type of situation where you're just being rebellious. But it gets to a point to where at one point you're going to kind of transition from that behavior that's like something that your parents might punish you for, but isn't necessarily that bad, to like breaking over the boundaries of saying you're actually breaking the law and you're being a menace to society. Right. And we started getting into that, started smoking cigarettes very young, then started stealing the cigarettes from the parents, started stealing bikes and candy bars and cigarettes from the stores, and then escalated to marijuana usage, and, doing whatever we could to get the marijuana, and like just staying out past curfew and all those things. But a huge transitionary period of my life, I say this all the time, is that each individual, we have periods of transition in our lives, whether that be like a losing of a loved one, a deep sickness, an incarceration, a marriage, a divorce of a marriage, a loss of a child, a birth of a child. And these different transitionary periods in our lives, they can either lead us in positive directions or negative directions. And it's all up to how you observe them, how you perceive them, and how you apply yourself in the midst of them. And probably around fourth or fifth grade, I ended up befriending somebody who became very close to me, that their older brother was in the business of distributing large amounts of marijuana and narcotics. And because his older brother was doing it, he kind of fell into it as well. So he was getting certain amounts and distributing it out to his friends and selling it, and then would go back and re-up from his brother. And at this time, as his brother was probably 21, 22, 23, and we were 15, 16, his brother at that time, keep in mind, probably thought like he was putting him up on game. Like, this is what I would say. This is like our OG. Like, he taught us the right way of how to participate in the game. Hey, this is how much it weighs. This is how much you should be paying. This is how much you should get for that. This is how much they should be distributed for. This is how much you should sell it for. Be careful when you're doing this. Yeah, like teaching us the right way. Don't spend all your money. Save and reinvest. The money that you're making isn't to be spent. It's to be reused to re-up on more product. Which is actually good business advice, by the way. Exactly. So he was literally my first business mentor, and I give him credit for that. Is that he did teach us the right way of how to participate in the avenue of business that he knew at that time. Right. So like, there's a lot of people who are conducting themselves in that sort of behavior pattern that might not have a mentor like that, who just re-up and then they burn up all their money because they don't know how to redistribute the funds that they're receiving for the product that they're selling to then redistribute back out to more product to be purchased, or to save it so that they can purchase larger quantities at lower prices, so then they can make more money on their profit. Right. But at the same time as he's teaching us the right way to participate in a negative behavior pattern, we are leading ourselves down a destructive pattern of abuse and destruction. Yeah. So you get into that. Do you think, Kyle, man, I'm really walking on the wild side? Or you think,
this is all good. You know, I'm getting my way. I'm feeling confident. This is me. Like, where were you in your thinking there? Because you know you're living both worlds. You're going home. Things are probably pretty normal, and then you're in this wild world. Did you feel like the adrenaline rush of being in that world, or was it scary and thinking I'm an imposter?
So I'm definitely an adrenaline junkie, and I'm also somebody who, like if somebody sees a positive trait in me and they point it out, it makes me feel good, and then I want to embrace that positive trait. So up until this point, like you said, I always felt very insecure in my own flesh of who I was, that I was incapable of certain things, that I always wanted to prove myself to the people around me. And when I got into this area, when I got into this relationship, when I was in this household, like my friend's older brother saw the positive attributes in me that I could be good at doing what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And he always, I noticed of him, like he was a good mentor, like he was a good leader. He would feed into me to show me that, like, you got what it takes. Yeah, you have what it takes, you know? So at that time, I being an adrenaline junkie, it fed me in a certain type of way. But then my mom did realize, and my parents did realize the destructive pattern that was occurring in my life. They could kind of see the downslide at this time. Keep in mind, I'm 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. I had got arrested like two or three times as a juvenile when I was 14, 15, 16, and I got two parents who are school teachers. Yeah. So then I get put on probation as a juvenile. My parents did everything they could, give them their credit, to try to straighten me out, whether it be threatening to send me to an in-house rehabilitation program, or, you know, scared straight programs, or like driving me to the police station, stuff like that. And, you know, there was one point that I want to point out. Like, I was at my friend's brother's house. The green team raided the house, right? Mm-hmm. So the green team in our area was a drug enforcement agency with special operations that was specifically geared towards narcotics, right? Okay. So they had been watching my friend's older brother. Me and my friend were at his house. Maybe 13, 14 at this time. I have an all-white Pele sweater on, which at this time, it was an expensive sweater my mom bought me. It was like $100 and something. And the green team comes over the fence, through the windows. Me and my buddy are in the backyard with his older brother. They got another guy in the back. We're going in the back to play cards, and they're coming from everywhere, right? So all of them, they got the machine guns, the whole nine, and they lay everybody down. And keep in mind, I'm 13, 14 years old, and I just stand there with my hands up. I'm not scared at all. And I'm like, man, it's all dirt in the backyard, and I got a white Pele sweater on. I'm like, man, I'm not laying down. And even my friend's older brother, who's probably, at that time, he's probably 23, 24, 25 years old. He's like, man, just lay down, you know? And I'm like, man, listen, I'm not laying down in this dirt with this white Pele sweater down. And the police officer literally grabbed the back of my shirt, pulled me over to the concrete, and had me lay down on the concrete because I wouldn't lay down. And then after that, my friend's older brother started calling me Iceberg Shorty, which at this time there was a brand called Iceberg, and I think there was a rapper out named that was calling him Iceberg Shorty. But and I was very short. I was like 5'2", and you know, that just enlivened that sense of bravado within me, that like, oh, I'm 13, 14, and like I'm not even scared where these grown men are like laying down and scared. But at the same time, I'm also an adolescent. Yeah. So my mindset is not correctly analyzed. My thought patterns and my awareness to the amount of devastation that could occur because I didn't lay down was not actually consciously aware in my mind. My mom picks me up from that scenario, and like, she didn't even really berate me like that. And she was just like, I mean, at that point, what could she really do? Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, it's interesting that you even at that age found yourself in that situation, but your immediate thought was, I'm not getting this sweater dirty. And you would think any other person that's in that situation hits the deck, you know, and you know, thinks that their life's over, and you literally were thinking about this fancy sweater, and I'm not getting this one dirty. So you get past that. So you've entered in, you've been in juvenile stuff. Lead us into the thing that where you got snagged up And it was a real nightmare that you go away.
Yeah.
How did all that happen?
Yeah, so this obviously progressed over time, right? Started with the bikes, then cigarettes, then marijuana, then getting plugged in with a guy who's a mentor who's doing a large amount of work. Then I start doing my own thing. This guy goes to prison. My buddy ends up dying. Now I'm starting to find new connects. I'm starting to take over. Now I'm getting larger amounts of work. Like, so this is a progressionary journey that occurred 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18
all
years
your
old.
Teens, yeah.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of different situations that happened along the way to where I could have been deterred off of this path. Yeah. So I want to hit on a couple of those before we get all the way into the end scenario. But fast forward a few years, right? And I'm doing a decent amount of work. At this time, a home invasion happens to me, right? So 2 guys kick in my door. They lay me down. They get my stuff. My brother ends up telling my parents. So my parents they sit me down. They say, look, you need to get out of this lifestyle. You're going to die. You're going to go to prison. They move me into a house. I stop for a little while, right? But I can't see any avenue besides what I'm doing to get out. I started going to college because that's what my parents told me to do. I'm doing that, but at the same time, I can't find an avenue to produce revenue fast enough. I'm used to living a bigger lifestyle.
Sure.
I end up getting back in. I'm going head first. It gets to the point where I set these different goals and standards for myself as I'm in the game, right? Okay, because at this point I got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'm always thinking like, oh, well, once I get out of college, if I have this amount of money saved up, like I'm still in the streets going to college, then I'll be good. I'll be set. Then I could just get my job, make my 50, 60 grand a year, have my money put up, have a house paid for. My end goal ended up being, you know what? Well, until I'm incarcerated or I am dead, I'm going to continue in the same type of lifestyle and pattern. And that was a very dangerous spot to be. So that's where my mindset was by the point of the large incarceration that I ultimately received. So my mindset was in a bad place, right? I ended up getting arrested 3 times in 4 months, all for exceedingly aggressive behavior. I ended up getting put on probation. So I stopped consuming marijuana, but now because I'm not smoking marijuana, I'm drinking large amounts of alcohol, right? And the large amounts of alcohol without the marijuana to calm it ended up leading me into more aggressive behaviors, right? More anger, more frustration, just more difficult scenarios that I'm getting myself into, right? Violence, more violence. I end up going to a bar, where my girlfriend at this time, she worked. I go to pick her up, and I end up getting into an argument with 3 guys, right? So because of the lifestyle that I'm currently living in at that time, I have a loaded firearm in my car, one in the chamber, sitting in the back seat of my car. So these 3 guys, they let me get up, and I get up. I say, all right, well, if you're follow me to my car, then just follow me out. And they do. I open the back door and I grab the firearm. I'm like, okay, what now? Y'all let me come out to my car. Like, that wasn't very smart, you know? And then his 2 buddies end up walking away like, oh, we don't want no problems, you know? But the other guy in the Department of Corrections, they call it checking in, right? Like, you got people who will check in, but they'll try to do it in a tough way. So, like, they're getting the officer's attention because they feel like if they get the officer's attention that you won't do anything to them, but they really want the officer's attention to get them out of trouble. So they do it in a way without, it's like dry snitching, right? So the guy, like, throws his arms up. Oh, you got a gun, huh? And, like, gets everybody's attention out at this restaurant and this facility. The girl comes out. She breaks us up. She says, Kyle, what are you doing? You're on probation. They called the police. You need to leave. So that kind of snaps me back in at that point. Because at that time, I'm kind of like locked in.
Yeah,
that's it. It's over with.
Yeah.
So then I get back in my car. But now he's following my car, selling me out. And at this point in my life, my ego is very big. Right? So when he's doing that, now I'm like, dang, now I look like the chump.
Yeah.
So I hop out of my car and I start shooting. And the guy, I shoot a couple in the air. The guy starts running. I'm like, okay, well, now you want to run. So then I start shooting towards him, but not like really trying to hit him, just scaring him. Then he dove behind a pole. I shot the pole a couple times. I got in my car and drove off, you know, and that was the amount of the circumstance and the situation. And, you know, I thank God today because I can describe this situation as though like it wasn't that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. But I know a lot of people that have been in that same type of situation who weren't necessarily truly intentionally desiring to injure anybody or to kill anybody.
Yeah.
And they killed somebody, or they killed multiple people, or they killed the wrong person, or a bullet ricocheted and hit an innocent bystander and killed him.
Right.
And any of those situations could have happened to me at that night. But praise God, you know, nobody was injured. And I ended up leaving that situation. I got away for the night, but then I was arrested later on in that same evening.
So how'd that happen? So they track you down. Were you at your house? Did they break in? What exactly happened when they actually got you?
So I ended up getting away. I was in a rental car at the time. I ditched the rental car at a friend's house. I got rid of the firearm. I got all the drugs out of my house in case the police did come. I mean, I had time. Mm-hmm. So I got rid of everything. At this point in my life, because of the circumstance of the life that I was living, I had 3 vehicles, a motorcycle, and I was actually driving a rental car that night. So I got rid of the rental car. I hopped in one of them. I took a shower, changed my clothes, thought I got rid of as much evidence as I could. But then I hadn't heard from the girl that I was dating at that time. So I was concerned. I was calling her. Where was she at? What happened? Trying to, you know, and my mind also wasn't operating right. Keep in mind, I'm still consuming alcohol. Yeah. I'm very intoxicated. This situation just happened. I don't know if I killed somebody. I don't know what happened. So my mind isn't in the right spot. And I end up going by the girl's house, and there's 3 police cars outside.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And as I drove by, even though I have 3 cars, I'm in just one of my random cars, I see one of our parents point to the car. Like, I don't know if they were saying that's him mm-hmm. or like that car doesn't belong in this neighborhood mm-hmm. or what, because I don't think they've ever seen this car before. And I circle around the block. The police end up chasing me. I get in a small speed chase. I end up pulling over, and they surround me and get me, you know, and I get arrested that night.
What are you thinking when that all is coming down? And I mean, I can't imagine the rush, because you're already thinking of the hours before that. You're cleaning everything out, taking a shower, trying to connect with your girlfriend, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're on the ground and they're arresting you. What's going through your mind?
How am I going to get out of this situation? So I had already been in trouble a couple times before this. I had already told on myself once. I had already been told on before. So I already knew at this point in my criminal career.
Did this one feel different?
It did, but oh yeah, of course, because I didn't know what happened. I didn't know if I killed somebody or what. And I just, you know, there's 3 cops at our house. So I'm thinking maybe something really serious happened or transpired. And I just, you know, I don't talk. You know, I don't say anything. Mm-hmm. I don't have my phone on me, so you have no proof of calls. You have nothing. Mm-hmm. You really have. So I'm thinking, well, you don't have any evidence. You don't have any proof. If I don't say anything, maybe I'll get out of here.
So what happens next?
So they lock me up. I go to the county jail. While I'm entering the county jail, I actually saw the girl that I was dating at the time in the county jail as well. They separated us very quickly, mm-hmm. but I saw her in the booking facility. So apparently at the establishment, they ended up arresting her as well. They used that as leverage to get information out of her mother, who didn't really know anything, but ended up giving the police my name, mm-hmm. which then they used that to try to turn some other people. They ended up turning one other person who knew me at the place by saying that the girl told, which she didn't. It was her mom. But then they used the other girl who turned to turn her. So now I got 2 witnesses that say I was on site and I was the one doing the shooting.
Wow. So how long does all this take from that point forward to where you're standing in front of the judge and you're getting sentenced?
So from that night, I never got out of the county jail. So since I was on probation in the state of Florida, they're able to hold you without bond based upon the fact that you got arrested while you were on probation.
Right.
So they held me without bond. So I wasn't able to get out. I wasn't able to get a bond. From that night forward, I didn't get out of jail. So I was in the county jail for close to a year.
Man.
Before I did end up pleading out. I was supposed to plead out to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. They ended up pleading me to first-degree attempted murder, which how that still arrived, I'm not sure. But that's what I ended up pleading out. I ended up receiving 10 years mandatory day-for-day Department of Corrections, state of Florida.
And that, when you're saying day-to-day, that means there's no good time. Like, in the federal system, you get a 10-year sentence, you serve 84% of that time. You're saying day-to-day, 10 years straight.
Yes, sir. Yep. 3,650 days.
That's a lot.
Yep.
It's a lot. So
yes,
what age are you, Kyle, when you walk into that?
I had just turned 21.
Wow. So you walk in, is this, what type of facility? Is this a maximum facility?
Yeah, so in the state of Florida, they don't actually have grades on their facilities, but they definitely do have, according to your classification standards or according to what type of violence, they call it CMs. So according to your classification, your control management, I was a level 4. So as high as it gets is a level 5. So they sent me to one of the highest grade facilities, which was Florida State Prison and Department of Corrections. It's where they actually house the death row inmates.
Yeah.
So they still have the death penalty in the state of Florida. We only have one facility that actually performs the death penalty, and it's Florida State Prison, FSP.
Well, so tell me, walking in as a 21-year-old, you're walking into the unknown world of that type of prison. What's going through your mind?
So I don't know what to expect, right? The first time I really spent any time in jail was then. So I had been arrested a few times before that, but only spent like one night in jail, bonded back out, was put on probation. I had some juvenile stuff, same sort of deal. Mm-hmm. Arrested, spent one night in JDC, and then back out. So the first experience I ever had was with the county jail in Pinellas County. But the county jail in Pinellas is rough. In the county jail in Pinellas, they do have different classifications for the type of crimes that you committed. And since I was a violent offender, I got put in a level 4 violent offender cells. Mm-hmm. So they hold that specifically for those people. And we have like a lot of shootings, a lot of murders, stuff like that. So I'm in the cells with other murderers, mm-hmm. And those sorts of crimes, right? Robbery, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, all that type of stuff. So it was pretty rough already in the county jail. So it kind of got me, spending a year in that, got me ready and prepared for the Department of Corrections. Yeah. So when I went into the county jail, I was very scared. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what to expect. But also because I was in the street life before I entered in the hood in Pinellas County in St. Petersburg, it's mostly black, mm-hmm. right? And, but at that time in my life, I don't want this to sound crazy, but you couldn't tell me that I wasn't black.
Yeah.
Right. I was very entrenched in the hood culture. I was very entrenched into the rap culture. I was very entrenched into the drug lifestyle. You couldn't tell me I wasn't from the hood. A lot of my friends were black. I was hanging out in the hood. I was living in the hood. I loved that type of lifestyle. Yeah. So when I went into the county jail, I ended up coming across a lot of people who either knew people that I knew from the neighborhoods that I was in or had heard of me from other people. Yeah. So it was still a rough scenario, but not as bad as what it might have been for some other people of my ethnicity who hadn't been living the lifestyle that I had been living for that period of time. And then also, as I stayed in the county jail longer, switching pod to pod, people knew me from the other pod. So then it became more acquainted and people, oh yeah, that's him. He was from over here and this and that. So mm-hmm. it got me accustomed to it when I entered in. The biggest struggle I had with the Department of Corrections in the state of Florida was they ship us. So our state is like 11 or 12 hours long, mm-hmm. right? To get from the north to the south of Florida.
Yeah, it's a long stay.
It takes you about 10 or 11 hours. So I'm from the west coast of Florida. I'm from Pinellas County, St. Petersburg. It's just west of Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater. And our city is very urban, right? So we're a very urban community. We have about 1 million people or a little over 1 million people and a very small amount of land. Mm-hmm. So like, if you guys know anything about Florida, if you know Tampa is about 3 times the size of us or 4 times the size of us, Hillsborough County. and they have 2 million people. So they're a bigger population than us, but they have 4 amounts of land mass. So we're a very industrialized, urbanized area. So when they incarcerated me, they sent me all the way up to Florida State Prison, which is in it's almost in the Panhandle.
Okay.
Right. And it's very country.
Mm-hmm.
It's very country. So when I get up there, the biggest struggle for me is one, dealing with the officers because they're all very country and I'm very city.
Right.
Right. And then also the population is very different. So since you have people shipped from all over our state in this population, this is the first time that that I can honestly say that I experienced like real racism. Mm-hmm. So like you got white pride, you got white power, and then you got the Spanish, and you got the black, and you got the gangs and everything.
It's very primitive.
And in my area, we didn't really have that at the time. It was more like neighborhoods and sex, like, you know, and so that was the biggest struggle for me, was dealing with the guards and then finding my body of people, because at that time, like, I'm not into any of that, you know?
So how did you integrate into that world? What became your world in that primitive world?
So again, I had some of the experience based upon the fact I was in the county jail for a period of time. And, you know, I knew that, like, my people, right? So when I was there was a decent group of people there that were from Pinellas County and from St. Pete, Clearwater. And we had our own group of individuals that we would hang with, you know. But for a period of time, you just got to feel your way around. But because I had been in the county jail for an extended period of time, and I had switched pods and stuff, I kind of was okay with, I knew what to do, right? You keep your mouth shut for a while, you observe, you see who is who, you kind of learn the population, and you go from there. But it was still rough at first. Like, I had got in 3 or 4 fights within my first time there. I spent a lot of time in confinement from either cussing the guards out or not doing what they told me to do, or just not following the rules and the regulations, or getting into fights, carrying a weapon, you know, whatever it is, you know, I spent time in confinement for that.
Well, you said, Kyle, that you did some hard time coming into that. And the other thing that you said is that you, early on, and, you know, 2 or 3 years into your sentence, you get into solitary confinement. Can you kind of walk me through how that happened, what happened to you? Because you had somewhat of a change in your mindset of what you were looking for, how you felt about yourself, and reaching out, and somebody gave you a book to read.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So while I was in the county jail, I was definitely going through it. You know, I was losing all my possessions just before I got incarcerated. I had purchased a house, you know, the cars had to go, you know, I had a bunch of people who owed me money that was trying to get collected. You know, none of my so-called friends were really around. We were struggling with the lawyer. You know, it was a difficult time facing that type of sentence. You know, in our state, the crime that I committed was punishable by up to life. So we got 10, 20 life. So use a gun 10, fire a gun 20, or use a gun in a crime 10, fire a gun in a crime 20, up to life, I think. So it's 10, 20 life. So I was punishable by 20 years to life for the sentence that I was looking at for first degree attempted homicide. And it was a very stressful time. And I had a cellmate of mine, they called him Little One. And he was, at this time in my life, he was somebody who I looked up to. I would say he was like an OG. He was like 23, 24. So he was like 3 or 4 years older than me. He had already been up the road once. He had all gold teeth in his mouth, and he carried himself well, right? So it was somebody who I respected. I called myself respecting him. And, you know, he told me, he said, look, man, you know, I know you don't want to do this. I know you think that this is not who you are, but, like, you know, I lost my mom a year or so ago, and the only person I have left is my sister, and she put me onto this book, the Bible, and man, I'm telling you, it gave me some comfort in my time of need. And at that point, I had tried opening it at Genesis and reading it, but it was like Japanese to me, you know. But from that day forward, I did try to read it just for the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that could be gleaned from it. I figured at this point, you know, until then, I was like, you know, look, I'm no hypocrite. I wasn't a schoolboy, and I wasn't a church guy. before I ever went in. So now that I'm in trouble, I'm not going to be turning to God. You know, I call myself keeping it real, right? And it's like, you know, if I wasn't into this in the street, now that I'm in trouble, I'm not going to get into it.
Right.
But ultimately, I praise God and thank little one for turning me on to the book that ultimately changed my life. And up to this point, I had been reading the Bible from that point forward a little bit here and there, but it had no real impact in my life. I couldn't really understand the scriptures. I had no knowledge or wisdom or understanding of what the Bible was actually teaching me. So let me back up a little bit. You know, for the first 2.5 years or 3 years of my incarceration, I think it was about the first 2.5 years, I spent 1.5 years of that in solitary confinement. And I hit on this a little bit, but like this was literally every month or 2 months, I was going into incarceration I was going into confinement or solitary for either 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, at some points 120 days. And I might get out at some points for a week, some points for 2 weeks, and go back in based upon the fact that I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I got into an argument with a guard. I cussed a guard out. I got into a fist fight. I got caught with a knife at one point. So just here and there, I kept going in, going out. At one point, I go in for a 30-day stretch. So at the first facility I was at, Florida State Prison, I ended up getting in enough trouble at that facility that I got a bad adjustment transfer. So they actually locked me up, transferred me from that facility to another facility because I had caused enough chaos at that place that they're like, it's time to get him out of here, and sent me to another facility. I went to another facility, still was going in and out of confinement. I caught a 30-day stretch in confinement. While I was in there, I caught 60 more days. So while I'm in confinement, I get in trouble again.
That's hard to do.
Where I received, where I received two more stretches. So I get, in total, I'm doing 90-day stretch. Okay,
that's a long time.
In this stretch, enough had been enough. You know, I had been in and out enough times. I had faced all these controversies in my life, all these difficult scenarios that I haven't even touched on this podcast. And, you know, my life was just broken. I was sick and tired of where Kyle was getting his life. With Kyle in control.
You were worn out on being sick and tired of Kyle.
I was worn out of driving. And I literally kneeled down at that point, man. Anybody who tells you need some water to get saved, anybody who tells you need a specific environment and setting to receive Christ in their life, man, it's in the scriptures, man. It's not just from Kyle, man. There's two criminals on the crosses next to Christ. And he tells the one, man, today you'll be with me in paradise. There wasn't any water. There wasn't a pastor to anoint him. It was him and Jesus, man. And he said, you know, he said, you know, he told the other criminal, hey, you know, we rightly so belong on this cross, but he does not. And Jesus invited him that day to join him in paradise. And, you know, that night I kneeled down and I said, Lord, earnestly, it says in the word, if you confess with your mouth and you believe in your heart, you know, a lot of people will tell you to say the sinner's prayer and you'll be saved. And man, you can say whatever you want out your mouth. If you don't believe it in your heart, man, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to happen. And I got to the breaking point, man. And I kneeled down that night. I said, Lord, you know, I'm tired. I'm tired of driving. You know, I'm tired of where I'm getting myself. I can't do this anymore on my own. I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this place alive the way that I'm going.
This is your rock bottom moment, really.
That's it, brother. That's it. You know, the 10-year incarceration, the facing the attempted murder, the losing the houses and the cars, none of that was enough. You know, I told you, man, I'm a very hard-headed individual. And I said earlier on this podcast, a lot of the things that are my superpowers are also my kryptonite when I apply them in the wrong way. And, you know, I'm a hard-headed person. You know, all these different scenarios and circumstances that you're hearing me go through on this podcast, none of these were enough for me to say enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Until I really had enough. Well, and, you know, from that, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't mean to break you off.
From that day forward, you know, my life was eternally changed. You know, he did a 180-degree change, and I don't like to beat up my salvation. You know, my company is named Redemption Auto Sales for a reason. There's a cross in my logo for a reason. I got a podcast called The Value Race. There's also a cross in that logo, and that's not an accident. You know, those aren't accidents. I told the Lord after I received Christ, I said, from this point forward, Lord, no matter what I do, no matter what success I receive, no matter what mountaintop I reach, no matter what platforms you put me on, no matter what stages I speak on, Lord, allow me to glorify and honor you in everything that I do.
Man, I like that. Let's take a break on that because I want to talk about what happens to you after this, because it's you keep stepping and it's inspiring. So
yes,
all those people out there, our other sponsor of the show, if you're in a crisis, if you need somebody to help you out, Aaron Duncan is your man. It's aaronduncan.net. What does Aaron Duncan do? Well, their job is to make bad news go away. They're known as the trauma surgeons of brand crises, corporate scandals, high-profile litigation, legal investigations, prosecutions. What do? They help you in crisis management, crisis communication, media relations, positive public relations, prison consulting, coaching, and getting you through it. For a confidential consultation regarding a crisis, contact Aaron W. Duncan at gmail.com, or phone number or text 636-236-5071. I know Aaron Duncan. He's been on this podcast. He does one hell of a job with the crisis management, and he can get you through. So it's aaronduncan.net. Okay, let's get back. I could have used aaronduncan.net back in my day.
You and me both. Man, struggling with them lawyers, brother. Struggling with them lawyers.
I need some navigation. So this is really something because, you know, you've said this a number of times, Kyle, and you get to a point and you can take a left turn or a right turn. And at this point in your life, you decided, I'm done with this path over here. I'm tired, worn out. I don't even know how I'm going to make it. I might not make it. And then you get inspired and really turn your life over to God, to Jesus, your faith. How do you step forward from that? And how does your life change? Because you still got, what, 6-7 years in prison, right?
Yeah, I still had like 7.5 years to go.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So how does your world change in there?
Man,
I know how we're going to talk about how it changed when you got out, but how did it change? What you had 7 years left.
Yeah. So I still had a long stretch to go, man. And, you know, I lived in a negative behavior, a negative lifestyle for a long period of time. And like you said, man, all of us have transitionary periods of our lives that we can look back on and say, you know, this was a make or break moment. This is what changed my life for the better. This is what changed my life for the better or the worst. And it's all on how we view it. It's all on our perspective. And it's what we do with those times and those seasons and those situations in our lives. And when at that point of period of my life, I knew that I was messed up. And I knew that I needed a lot of help. And I knew that if anything was going to change in my life, I had to start doing the work too. You know, in the Bible, it says faith without works is dead. I believe that we have to give it over to the Almighty God, but we also have to be willing to do the work for ourselves. Right. And, you know, there's a lot of people who are inside and they'll be like, oh, I received Christ, so I'm good. And it's like, bro, well, you better go grab a book. You better go study, man. You better educate yourself to the best of your ability. You better go work your body. You know, I got a 4-pillar pattern of life that I believe in, and it's mind, body, spirit, soul. And I found that foundation when I was incarcerated. And a lot of those same patterns and habits, those rituals and routines that I applied when I was inside are the same things that I'm applying out here to be successful. And, you know, with those 4 pillars, you got to touch one of those pillars each and every day. You got to be working on your mind. You got to be working on your body. You got to be working on your spirit. You got to be working on your soul.
I like it.
And if you're not contributing to each one of those patterns every single day, you're not going to have a well-rounded life.
Get out
and,
of
you know,
alignment.
at that, exactly. You got to keep that alignment with your purpose, with your creation, what you're destined for, with what your gifts are. And you got to be waking up each and every day willing to serve, ready to serve, willing to work on yourself more than you work on other people. And then feeding into other people's lives is what you have received into your life. So I talked about the first mentor that I had in my life, who was the individual who taught me the first entrepreneurship lessons that I had. And after I received Christ, I met my second mentor. His name was Brother Art. His name is Arthur Hughes. He's still serving a life sentence in the Department of Corrections, state of Florida. I pray that ultimately he had some appeals in. Maybe one day they'll let him out. I pray to God they do, because if I've ever met a warrior for faith, if I've ever met a warrior for Christ, it's him. And, man, this guy, he would walk around with dictionaries in his pocket, with Bibles in his pocket, with atlases in his pocket, studying, researching, educating, pulling people out of gangs. And I ended up to just stumble across this guy in the dormitory that I was released into out of that confinement stretch. And we ended up building a short-term relationship. I literally lasted 3 days, guys. Listen to this. I got saved. I did 90 days in incarceration, in a confinement. I got saved. Miraculous delivery in Christ. I got out. I was out 3 days, and I was back in confinement.
Oh, yes.
But God knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
You know, my brother in my podcast, my co-host in the podcast, he says a lot, man. God knows what he's doing. And God knew what he was doing that day. He allowed me to be released into that dormitory, met Brother Arthur Hughes, made it 3 days, and was back in confinement for another 30-day stretch. But I had met Arthur Hughes, and that's what I needed to do. So as I'm in confinement, because of the pull that Arthur Hughes had at that facility, he was able to actually come visit me in confinement, send me some books, send me some letters, send me some food and stuff like that. I actually had to do a PSI on the compound on Brother Arthur Hughes because in my mindset and my attitude at that time, I'm like, man, who the hell is this dude? I don't even know him like that. Mm-hmm. You know, he's sending me food back here. Like, I don't want to eat the food, you know, because I don't know the guy at the time. Like, right. I'm like, is he up to something no good? You know, and all of the references I got is like, nah, man, he's an OG. That's real. He must have seen something in you, mm-hmm. and he wants to feed into you. There is no there's no alternative source or method that he's trying to get to. You know, that's just who he is. So I'm like, all right. And I found out he was in there for murder. He was an OG on the street. He carried himself well. He's a stand-up guy, a man of faith, but also a man of action inside Department of Corrections. You know, and he's the first individual that I really can say showed me how to put the faith into practice. Like, I've met people before. I have people in my circles, friends, mothers who were saved and stuff like that. But this is the first guy who I can really say walked in the steps of Jesus, like reaching back into the fire to pull people out, you know, unashamedly representing Christ in the world, you know, was meek and humble and yet still at the same time held a backbone and people wouldn't walk over him and hold himself with ethics and morals and values and didn't let anybody tread on that. And at the same time, like, don't cross me with the wrong way because you're not just going to get over on me. And, you know, Jesus operated in that same standard. He was very meek, humble, loving, caring, giving of the shirt off his back, washing his apostles' feet. But at the same time, when people were not living up to the standards that God set, he jumped on the tables with a whip and whipped the people up out of the synagogue, getting them out of there. He was not afraid to represent what he knew the calling of God was. And this is how Brother Arthur Hughes was. And he was an individual, man. The strongest leader I ever met, man. He didn't lead with words. He led with actions. He didn't tell you what to do. He showed you. Mm-hmm. And then he led you in the correct direction to where you could make the decisions for yourself. So that's real leadership. Leadership isn't telling somebody what to do, guys.
Yeah. Leadership
is guiding somebody in the direction that they ought to go and allowing them to make the decision for themselves.
Exactly. So I guess I'm thinking that helped you eat up your time with the whole different mindset of how you were tackling yourself and mind, body, everything that you were talking about, that you had to have just felt different, and you probably hung around with different people and did your time differently.
Everything changed at that point, guys. Up to that point, I was very bitter. I was angry. Mm-hmm. I was disturbed. I was grieving. I blamed everybody else but myself.
Yeah, you were a victim.
I was a victim. I had a massive victim mindset. It's everybody else's fault but mine. It's my parents' fault.
Yeah.
It's my ex-girlfriend's fault. It's her mom's fault. It's the people who told on me fault. It's the people who approached me in the bar's fault. Everybody but me.
And I always say to Kyle, when somebody talks about, you know, because it's easy to blame. I mean, we're in a blaming society, right? Everybody's a victim. But, you know, there's a true difference between a victim and a survivor. And once you grasp on that you're surviving this, you're stepping forward with this, you're overcoming this, that's a whole different feel than being pointing fingers. And, you know, it takes away all your strength and you end up in a fetal position in the corner, and you can't take on life. But you're stepping through it now as a survivor that's going to take on responsibility to move forward. And I think that's a huge thing as far as how
huge transitionary period, man. And it goes for the same thing for anybody who's listening to this, whether you've been incarcerated or not. if you're living in a victim mindset right now, you're incarcerated in the status of your own mind.
That's right.
Whether it be in that relationship that you're in, whether it be in that career or form of employment, whether it be in some friendship circles that you don't belong in. Yep. If you're blaming everybody else, you're in the incarceration of your own mind.
Yep. Prison of your own mind.
And when you're living in that victim mindset, man, it's a very heavy burden to bear. And when I was able to accept responsibility for the accountability, take the ownership of the things that I was responsible for, that was when the transition occurred. And I was able to look at my incarceration not as a punishment, but an opportunity. And when I began to look at it as an opportunity, everything began to transition. Everything began to change. I instead of looking at my release date, I started focusing on my push-up. And I use that terminology a lot because in the Department of Corrections, they talk about doing your time and not letting your time do you.
That's right.
And there's a lot of people out here in the free world who are not doing their time, but they're allowing their time to do them.
Yep.
They're at work right now. They're focusing on 5 o'clock when they could punch out and go live their life instead of looking at what they can possibly contribute into society at that time, living up to the utmost of their ability with the opportunity that they have that's right in front of them, contributing to it with their absolute maximum capacity so that they could actually get fulfillment out of that job, out of that employment, out of this world. We can get enjoyment out of flipping fries the same way that we can get enjoyment out of flipping cars.
That's right.
It's just the way that you perceive it. I tell people a lot, man, do you think that I woke up one day and said that Kyle's purpose is to be the absolute best car dealer that he can be?
Yeah.
That never came across my mind. When I received Christ, I knew that it was up to my responsibility, according to the calling that God placed upon me, to be the best human that I could be every single day and to use every opportunity that he provided me to give him honor and shine him glory. And how I do that is by using the opportunities and gifts that he provided me, which is life, breath, and health itself. You know, every day, you wake up every day just expecting that you're going to wake up tomorrow.
Right.
That's not the case, man. There's a lot of people who didn't wake up today. There's a lot of people who might have woke up this morning and they're not alive right now.
Yeah. No guarantees.
So we have to live up to our fullest potential every moment that we're alive. And that's why I have enjoyment. That's why I have purpose. That's why I live in my gift. That's why I have fulfillment, because I wake up every single day, no matter what position I'm in, and I do it to the absolute best of my ability. And that's living within my gift and my potential and my purpose.
Let's talk about when you start getting close to the door, getting out of this 10-year day-to-day, a hard 10 that you did. What are you thinking as far as getting out? What's going through your mind?
So I knew, like, when I received Christ, I knew, like I said, that I was messed up. So I knew I had to do everything that I could at that point to make sure that if I wanted something different than I had received up to that point, I had to do something different, right? Albert Einstein, the famous quote, doing the same thing and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, right? So I knew that, like, I had to do something different. Praise God, I met Arthur Hughes. He sent me a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad that absolutely transitioned and changed my life.
Yeah.
So, but I tell people, besides the Bible, the most influential book that I ever received was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because it was the first business book that I ever read. There's a quote in Rich Dad, Poor Dad that he talks about having so many different ways to make money legally that he can't fathom how people risk their lives to make money illegally.
Yeah.
And that's one quote out of the book that really transitioned my thought pattern, because I said, man, all I was doing was risking my life to receive financial reward, and it never really fulfilled any purpose or destiny in my life. Like, I still felt empty. There was a point in my life before I became incarcerated that I went to my mother in tears with a bunch of money in a Ziploc bag. And I said, Mom, it was probably like $30,000-$40,000 in cash. I'm 20 years old, 19 years old, and I'm in tears because I'm saying, Mom, I'm literally risking my life. I realized that I was risking my life to make money, to spend money with people who had billions of dollars. I'm buying Jordans. I'm buying jewelry. I said, I can't even keep my water on without this right here.
Yeah.
And I don't have any other way to make this besides risking my life. Like, I couldn't see any way out. So I saw that.
That's what you thought.
I saw the disillusionment in it before I was ever incarcerated, but I had got to such a status in that type of behavior pattern and lifestyle that I couldn't see any way out. It was the only thing that I knew in my mind. So when I received this quote from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it completely threw that light bulb to where I said, okay, now I need to figure out different ways, different methods, different techniques to make this money financially. And I dove into personal development, education, spiritual development, mentorship, leadership, guidance. So I had a mentor, and the mentor helped teach his proteges how to mentor.
That's
so
awesome.
He encouraged us to take, he would talk about a 3-pillar relationship pattern, which is you always got to have relationships with people above you.
Mm-hmm.
You always got to have relationships with people on your same level. And you always got to have relationships with people beneath you, pulling them up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're operating in that sort of standard, you're living a fulfilled life because you're receiving from those people who are before you. You're sharing information with people who are on the same path as you. And you're passing down the information to the people who are underneath you, helping to pull them up.
I love that.
And when I dedicated my life for the rest of my incarceration in that mindset, the 4-pillar pattern of mind, body, spirit, soul, every single day,
mm-hmm.
focusing on the push-up, not the release date, focusing on what I could add back into the society and the contribution, focusing on what I could receive from the people who had it before me, I worked my patterns all the time that I was there so that when I was released, I had to add back into society and had an opportunity to succeed.
You're ready. You had planned for it and educated yourself. So talk us about how you got to where you are right now. It's good.
I know we're dragging out. I'm long-winded, guys. I'm sorry, man. I can talk. Yeah. So so when I was released, I had did all it's so hard, man, because when you're going over such a long period of your life, literally going over from the time of your childhood through difficult scenarios of your life, in through the incarceration, out the other side to the success now that you currently have. There's so many things that are getting passed over, little nuggets that you want to share with people.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to pass over them, but let me dig into it. So when I was released, man, I was fortunate enough that my parents, at 31 years old, I got incarcerated at 21. I did 10 years day for day. I was 31 years old when I was released. My parents allowed me to move back in with them rent-free.
Okay.
I had received a wastewater drinking water license for the state of Florida while I was incarcerated, studied on my own. They didn't provide me the materials. My parents did. My parents paid for the state education board test that we took. I was fortunate enough at my last 3 years of incarceration to be at a facility that they actually had a wastewater plant on site.
It's awesome.
God opened up the doors for me to be able to work that facility, so I got my training hours. I was released 3 weeks out. My mom actually did the application online for me because I couldn't even, at that point, I had been so out of the loop that I couldn't even do it. Yeah. I couldn't even use a phone. Hadn't seen a phone. There was no such thing as a smartphone before I was incarcerated.
Right. 10 years is a long time.
And got a job with the city of Clearwater.
But didn't you have a situation where they didn't automatically just take you because you had your record and you had to fight with that?
Yeah, so they actually did. Yeah, so they actually did 3 interviews with me. Yes. The common standard for the municipality of City of Clearwater is to do 1.
Right.
But, I'm well-spoken. I know how to speak. I know how to carry myself. I went in there with a tie, dressed up, nice shoes. And, I spoke myself into the interview process. Plus, I had been doing the job for 3.5 years in incarceration.
Right.
And I spent so much time studying the books, taking all the tests. I had already passed the Class B test, which is it's not just the entry level, it's like the mid. So in the state of Florida, you have Class C, Class B, Class A. It takes 5 years to get an A. It takes 2 years to get a B. And you have to have a year of hours to get a C. So I had the Class C, but I already had the B test passed with the state of Florida. So I had the education. I had the knowledge. But when they sent it to Human Relations to hire me, they're like, man, this guy just got out of Department of Corrections for first-degree homicide attempt. Like, we can't hire this guy. And the guy actually liked me so much, he fought with Human Relations to bring me on. And they said, well, do another interview. He did another interview. I showed up the same person, not high, not drunk, well-spoken, well put together, same knowledge. He went back to him again. They still said no. They said, do another interview with the director of utilities. So they actually called me another time in for a third time with the director of the entire utilities department for the city of Clearwater. This guy is the manager over 400 employees. Mm-hmm. And they made me sit down with everybody. It was like 7 people in this room. And they started acting like it was a normal interview. Then they sat me down. They said, listen, Kyle, we want you to know that we liked you the first time, we liked you the second time, but we know about your incarceration, we know about your record, and that's why you're here for a third time.
Mm-hmm.
And how, this is like a high school setting. How are you going to handle this when this comes out? And I said, listen, guys, I did those things.
Mm-hmm.
I can't cover that up. I know that I did it, but at the same time, I spent a lot of time working on myself to become the individual who I am. I know that people are going to judge me according to my past experiences and the things that I've committed in my life, but that's not who I currently am. And that's not how I'm going to show up for you guys today. I hope that people can judge me based upon the activity that I put forth today, the effort that I put forth today, the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that I put forth today, the empathy that I put forth today. But if they don't, that's fine as well. I understand that there's going to be people that are going to hold my past activity and my past actions against me. And that's fine. I don't hold that against them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to continue to conduct myself in the same way that I know how. And ultimately, I believe this is one of my true foundational beliefs, that I believe that when you're an individual of character and conduct, when you hold yourself above board and you continue to carry yourself on your principles, your morals, and your ethics, ultimately, those same people who judged you according to your past, they're going to come around based upon your character, your moral, and your principles that you continue to carry yourself on, because they're going to see that you're not altering and that you're not changing and that it's not an act, that it's real.
Well, the reason I wanted to bring that up is because this podcast goes into 235 prisons, and I wanted them to know that, yes, it's really hard on reentry. And you've got to be prepared for reentry, and you're going to carry that with you in any interview you go into. But you didn't give up on those interviews. You kept fighting for the person you were, to show them the change that you had made, and you got that job.
And there's another huge thing that I want to tell you guys who are incarcerated, man. There's a huge misalignment in the Department of Corrections that people want to blame other people for judging them for their incarceration. Like, brother, how can you blame somebody else for judging you according to the activities that you took part in?
Right.
They don't have any responsibility to judge you according to who you are now. You have the responsibility to take ownership and accountability of the activities that you took part in then, and then prove yourself on the other side. Like I used to tell friends of mine, man, I told you beginning, I had a lot of friends in our community down south, man. It's a big thing to put a lot of gold teeth in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of friends with a mouthful of golds, and they wanted to get out and to have a law-abiding position and job. And I said, the first thing that somebody's going to look at is your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you can't pass judgment on somebody because they perceive according to what they see in front of them, that they believe that according to that standard that you're going to conduct yourself a certain way. It's up to you to prove them different.
Right.
Just like my friends who are tattooed from neck down to their feet, you put those tattoos on your body. Nobody made you put that on yourself. You can't judge somebody else because they judge you according to the things that you did to yourself. It's up to you to prove to them that these things don't define me and make me, that it's my conduct and my character and my attitude that does.
That's powerful. I want to go into how in the world did Redemption Auto come around?
So I started working for the city of Clearwater. I had a buddy of mine who was buying and selling a few cars on the side. He was a licensed automotive dealer. Good friend of mine. I owe him the world because, man, he allowed me to come up and take tutelage and lineage up under him. Just like I had a mentor before, just like I had a mentor while I was incarcerated. He mentored me for the beginning standards and kind of showed me what he was doing. And I just kind of picked it up and ran from there. I was working full-time for the city of Clearwater, giving them 100 hours every 2 weeks, while in all my spare time chasing him around to the auction, seeing what he was doing, trying to contribute to his business to the best of my ability, and learning from him every step of the way. And I started buying and selling cars under his license. It started getting to where I was flipping 2-3 cars a month. And he just said, man, he was running a small operations. His wife was doing all of his bookkeeping. It was just a small shop with him and his dad, and my cars were being stored there. And he's just like, listen, man, you're doing too many cars. It's too much paperwork. You're taking up too much of our space. Like, it's time for you to do your own thing. And, there was a piece of me that felt like he might have thought that I wasn't going to continue doing it. Like maybe I was kind of getting in his way. Mm-hmm. But there was also a piece of me that thought that, maybe he just felt like it was time for me to go out on his own. And whenever you have a mentor in your life, like there's going to come that moment. You hear about it a lot that they're going to kick the chicken out of the nest, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to kick the chick out of the nest. And regardless of what their thought pattern on it is, it's up to you with what you do with it. You can allow that to be your stumbling block. Again, blame them, blame everybody else, play a victim, or, you tighten up your bootstraps, you put your big boy pants on, and you run the play. Mm-hmm. And all of us have the ability to run the play, man. It's up to you. Are you going to be tenacious? Are you going to be intense? Are you going to have the passion? Do you got the drive? Do you got the urgency to put that into practice and to put that into activity and to live it out? Or are you going to allow these dreams and these visions and these aspirations that you have for your life to fall by the wayside because you're going to remain in your zone of comfort?
And you don't want to be, I always talk about this, Kyle, you don't want to be that 85-year-old rocking on the rocking chair saying, man, I wish I was in the game. And you stood on the sidelines the whole time and now it's too late.
Yeah. I mean, this life is to be lived. These dreams are to be lived out, they're not to be left on the stand at the end of your life. None of us are taking it with us, man. But I live every single day.
I think the other thing that is a huge nugget that you're giving people is every step of the way that you're humbling yourself, looking for mentors that can lead you into more knowledge, and you take that knowledge and take action. That's such a big thing for anybody at any stage of their life. There's always answers out there. There's always people that you can learn from. If you humble yourself, look for it, and then go ask them, man, how are you getting this right? Let me figure this out too.
So good, man. There's so many people, and it's not just looking for the information, man. You hit on a key element. It's not just looking for the information; it's putting it into action.
Yes.
Right. So there's a lot of people, who do a lot of masterminds. I'm a member of the Arte Syndicate, member of the Real Business Owners Mastermind, member of a small group called the Warriors for Christ. But it's like, you're not just going to these places to glean. You're going to serve.
Yeah.
You're going to add value in whatever ability that you can. And you're making sure that you're applying the information that you receive from these people in your life on a daily basis so that they can see that you're putting it into action.
Right.
Like if you have a mentor in your life and they see that they're giving you information that you're not applying, they're going to stop giving you information.
Yeah. So was it easy to get this dealership license?
Nothing's easy, man. My mom used to tell me, man, I say this quote a lot, is that nothing worthwhile in life is easy. And most likely if it's easy in life, it's not worthwhile.
That's right.
And, everybody thinks that like this business is easy, that business is easy, breeding dogs is easy, real estate is easy, running a restaurant is easy, selling cars is easy. It's like people think that this is just sweet.
Yeah.
In the state of Florida, they make you actually rent your location before you can ever apply for your license. They make you do it backwards. They tell you not to do it, but nobody's going to hold a commercial leasing property for you for months on end without you putting any money down.
Right.
And me being a convicted felon, there was a lot of people who told me that I wouldn't be able to receive the license. I don't just got like a small crime. I got a first-degree homicide attempt.
Yeah.
So like there was a lot of people that said based upon the egregiousness of my criminal activity, like they won't give me the license.
Right.
But praise God, man. In the Bible, it says God's going to open up doors for you that no man can close, and he's going to close doors for you that no man can open. And he kicked that door slap open for me. And when you put, faith without works is dead. When you take that faith and your belief in yourself and your belief in what God has called you to do and your belief in your gifts and your talents and your belief that showing up every single day is your value into the world, in our podcast, we believe that it's not about any end destination. It's about the purpose of pursuing the journey. Mm-hmm. Every single day when you're showing up in faith, understanding that it's not about the end destination. It's about what you do today. I'm doing what I can do today, and I'm allowing God to take care of the rest.
Yep.
And when you're showing up in that manner, man, he's going to open up those doors for you so that you can have those platforms ultimately to point people back up to him. Just like coming on this podcast today, Travis Ritchie introduced us, the podcast that I have, The Value Race. He has opened up so many doors for me so that I can ultimately tell him my story, add value back into the world, and ultimately point people up to him. Hey, guys, there is nothing different about me, right? I'm a guy who dropped out in 9th grade. SLD, they try to put me in emotionally handicapped classes. 10 years incarceration. My story is probably a lot worse than most of yours.
Yeah.
And yet I stand here today with a company that did $2.2 million last year.
Yeah.
We're on projection to do $4.5 million this year already. We had the best month that we've ever had last year, doing 30 units for a total profit of $85,000 in 1 month. $85,000, man. There was some months and the last year and a half that we made $10,000. In 1 month, last month, we made $85,000. And this isn't to boast and brag on the amount, because there's a lot more people who are doing a lot greater things financially to me. It's to point out to you guys that when you're not afraid to step out on the faith that God has placed inside of you on what you can accomplish, what you can do, there's no telling of what you can do when you just keep taking action and you don't take no for an answer.
Yep. Love it. That is so true. I mean, I'm getting inspired. I'm thinking it's early in the morning. I need to go out and do something.
Let's get after it.
So Kyle, you build this. You get your dealer's license. You start building this business. I want to ask you this because you've given us so much good information here. All this stuff that you've lived through. I mean, all that stuff. I always ask these people that are on this podcast, what do you think is your biggest takeaway to impart to the people listening?
Man, don't take no.
Don't take no.
Don't give up. If I tell anybody, if I have one winning characteristic that is built into my life, it's tenaciousness. It's the ability to not receive the answer no and to accept it for yourself. Not to allow other people's limiting beliefs to stop you. Not to allow your own limiting beliefs to stop you. So I tell people, like, when I was incarcerated, my biggest vision that I could establish for myself was to get a city job and to flip a couple cars on the side. Yeah. And I was doing that within a month of me being out of release.
After 10 years in prison.
After 10 years. So my vision was limited to what I could see for my life at that time. But as I continued to put the blocks and lay the blocks of my life, as I continued to lay the mortar down before me, as I continued to pave out my life, and God continued to clear out, it says, allow your word to be a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Clear the path before me, God. And as you continue to step out in life and you continue to experience more things, you're going to have a bigger vision of what you can accomplish with your life. So do you think that, like, when I was incarcerated, I envisioned this life of being able to make this type of money, this type of impact, hiring people into a company? My biggest vision was, hey, I'll go get a city job and flip a couple cars on the side and have a decent little life and live the rest of my life that way.
Yeah.
But as I continue to do the work, as I continue to see the greater vision, it continued to lay out in front of me bigger and bigger and bigger. So I tell people, man, I don't believe in accomplishing goals, but I believe in setting them.
Yes.
Because what happens is I set goals. Before I even get to that goal, because I'm reverse engineering it and I'm doing the work to actually achieve that goal on a daily basis, because of the individual that I become in the pursuit of that goal, my vision actually becomes bigger.
Yeah,
so most of the time before I actually receive that goal, my pitchforks go further. Yep. My goalpost goes further, and I set a bigger goal and a bigger goal and a bigger goal before I even get to the first one. Let me lay one out for you that I just told my wife about. I haven't shared this with anybody. I'm going to share it with you guys on this podcast.
This is on this podcast.
My goal for this year was to flip 30 cars in 1 month.
Yep.
Last year we flipped 24. We flipped 24 retail, 6 wholesale. I never counted wholesale before, but 5 of those wholesale were for profit. So realistically, we did flip 30, but I'm not counting it. I'm counting it as 24. We did $85,000 in revenue. So now, before I even got that 30-car goal, I'm not even counting it. I told my wife, my next goal is to make $100,000 in profit in a month.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, as you continue to go and as you continue to set these goals and as you continue to reverse engineer the goals and do the work that it actually takes to achieve the goals, you'll produce different results that make your vision bigger, that allow you to set a bigger goal that you can then attempt to attain, that you can become a bigger individual in your life, that can then transform the way that you think and transform who you are, transform the value that you can add, and transform what you can actually produce in your life. And if you keep living on that standard, you're going to live for each and every single day, every breath that you have, to the absolute most of your ability and your potential. You're going to live for your purpose. You're going to have a fulfilled life, because it's not about the destination. It's about what you're doing right now to achieve greatness in your life.
Man, I love that. Turn your scoreboard on, man. That's good stuff. That is good stuff. Kyle, how do people get a hold of you, your podcast, everything?
Yeah, so you can go to thevaluerace.com. That's our podcast. Also on Instagram, it's at The Value Race. My personal Instagram is Mr. _No ceiling. Mr. _No ceiling. You can find me on Facebook. It's just my name, Kyle, Kyle Chiaponne, Chiappone. My company is Redemption Auto Sales, Redemption Auto Sales Incorporated. We're Redemption Auto on Facebook, Redemption Auto on Instagram. And our website for our business is 200autos.com, 200autos with an S.com. But I really encourage you guys, man. I'm trying to grow this podcast. I'm trying to grow my personal brand. If you guys could follow me on Instagram at Mr._No Ceiling. If you guys could check out The Value Race on Instagram, The Value Race on all the major podcast platforms, whether it be Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, please tune in, rate, review, follow. I truly appreciate it, man. And I appreciate you, Brent, for having me on.
Oh, man, I love it. And it is a big deal for all those guys that are doing podcasting. The Apple reviews, they give the fuel to pumping up the volume on promoting the show. So if you go to Apple, you drop those, you go to the podcast page, and you scroll down and it says write a review. If you write a review, it's awesome. Anybody want to get a hold of me? It's BrentCassidy.com. I spell Cassidy wrong. It's with a T-Y. Leave me a message there. And if you're looking for a book, I wrote one, Nightmare Success. You can get that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. As I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong and I'll do the same. Kyle Chiaponne, man, thanks for all your words of wisdom today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, brother, so much for having me on. It was an honor and a pleasure. I'm truly, truly humbled, man, to even be able to have the opportunity to be introduced to guys like you, to come on podcasts like that. It still blows my mind today. You know, we were just chopping it up earlier, and you were asking me when I got released, and I said June 29th, 2017, man, and to me, it still feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
So to even have this opportunity, have this platform, have this ability, have this podcast studio to be able to contact you and have these discussions with you, it literally blows my mind. So I appreciate the invite. It was an honor.
Well, Kyle, you're an inspiration, man. I appreciate it. Nightmare Success, in and out. We'll see you. Bye.